Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by saying this: detachment gets a bad rap. Emotional detachment is a concept that often carries a negative connotation, yet at its core, it is about something profoundly liberating. It is not about turning away from the world or severing ties with the people we care about. It is not about shutting down emotionally or becoming unfeeling. Instead, emotional detachment is a practice of creating space between ourselves and the overwhelming weight of expectations, relationships, and outcomes. It is a way of stepping back just enough to gain clarity, perspective, and balance, allowing us to engage more authentically with ourselves and others. Too often, people confuse detachment with coldness, and that misunderstanding can lead to resistance. We are taught implicitly or explicitly that the more we care about something or someone, the more we should invest ourselves completely, body, mind, and soul. But in that overinvestment, we can lose sight of who we are and what we need. Emotional detachment offers a way to recalibrate. It's about recognizing where our emotions are overly tied to things outside of our control and gently untangling those threads one by one. Consider how often we tie our self-worth to outcomes or relationships. We tell ourselves, if I can just get that promotion, then I'll feel valued, or if I can make this person happy, then I'll be worthy of love. These kinds of thoughts, while human and common, can tether us to things that are inherently unstable. Outcomes can change. People can disappoint us or struggle to meet our expectations. Life itself is unpredictable, and when our emotions are deeply entangled with external circumstances, we set ourselves up for frustration, pain, and exhaustion. Emotional detachment doesn't mean we stop striving or caring. It means we learn to care differently. It's about shifting the focus from clinging to control or validation to trusting that we have what it takes to navigate whatever comes our way. It's not about detaching from people, but detaching from the idea that we are responsible for their happiness, decisions, or actions. It's not about abandoning goals, but releasing the pressure to achieve them at the expense of our mental and emotional well-being. Think about relationships, for instance. How often do we see people become consumed by the need to fix someone they love? Whether it's a friend, partner, or family member, this fixation can lead to a cycle of over-involvement and burnout. We want so badly for the people we care about to thrive that we start to carry their burdens as if they were our own. But when we do this, we risk overstepping boundaries, both theirs and ours. Emotional detachment invites us to step back and trust that other people are capable of finding their way, even if it's not the way we would have chosen for them. Detachment doesn't diminish the love we feel for others. If anything, it strengthens it. It allows us to offer support from a place of balance rather than desperation. It reminds us that love isn't about control or sacrifice. It's about presence, respect, and acceptance. When we detach emotionally, we aren't saying, I don't care. We're saying, I care enough to give you the space to be who you are while I remain grounded in who I am. This principle applies just as much to our relationship with ourselves as it does to others. Emotional detachment helps us recognize the difference between our feelings and the stories we tell ourselves about those feelings. It's easy to get caught up in narratives that keep us stuck, stories about not being good enough, about needing to prove our worth, about how things should be. These stories can take on a life of their own, pulling us away from the truth of our experiences and into a web of anxiety, regret, or resentment. Detachment offers a way out of that web. It allows us to acknowledge our feelings without being ruled by them. It encourages us to let go of the need to control every aspect of our lives and instead embrace the ebb and flow of uncertainty. This isn't about resignation, it's about trust. Trust in our ability to adapt, trust in the strength of our values, and trust in the process of growth. At its heart, emotional detachment is an act of self-compassion. It's about giving ourselves permission to set boundaries, not because we're selfish, but because we deserve peace. It's about recognizing that our worth isn't tied to how much we give, how much we achieve, or how much we endure. And it's about creating space to reflect, to breathe, to connect with what truly matters. When we practice emotional detachment, we begin to see things more clearly. We realize that many of the things we cling to, whether they're people, outcomes, or expectations, are not as essential to our happiness as we once thought. We learn to differentiate between what is within our control and what is not, and we discover the freedom that comes from focusing on the former while releasing the latter. This isn't to say that detachment is easy. It's a practice, not a one-time decision. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. But as we take those first small steps, we begin to notice a shift. We feel lighter, more grounded, and more connected to ourselves and the world around us. Emotional detachment is not a rejection of connection, but an invitation to engage with life more intentionally. It's about choosing to show up for ourselves and others with authenticity and balance, knowing that true connection doesn't come from clinging, but from the freedom to simply be. The fear of letting go is deeply rooted in the human experience. It's a fear that whispers to us in moments of uncertainty, convincing us that if we release our grip, we'll lose something vital, something we believe defines us. This fear stems from our need for control, connection, and security. It's not inherently bad. It's part of our survival instinct. Yet when it takes over, it can lead us into patterns of clinging, overthinking, and resisting the natural flow of life. At its core, the fear of letting go often originates from our desire to maintain a sense of identity. We attach ourselves to roles, relationships, and outcomes because they provide a framework for who we believe we are. This attachment can be comforting even when it's tied to things that no longer serve us. It can be difficult to distinguish between what feels familiar and what feels right. Letting go challenges us to confront that distinction, and this confrontation can feel deeply unsettling. One of the most common ways this fear shows up is in our relationships. Whether it's a friendship, a romantic partnership, or even a family dynamic, we often hold on tightly to the people we care about. We fear that if we let go, if we step back or loosen our grip, we'll lose the connection altogether. This fear can make us overextend ourselves, sacrificing our own needs in the process. It can make us hesitant to set boundaries, worried that doing so will push others away. But when we act from this place of fear, we risk building relationships that are more about dependency than genuine connection. The fear of letting go isn't limited to relationships. It can manifest in our attachment to outcomes, goals, or expectations. We set plans in motion, imagining exactly how things should unfold, and then we cling to those visions as if our happiness depends on them. We convince ourselves that if things don't go exactly as planned, it means we failed, or worse, that we're not enough. This kind of attachment can lead to a constant state of tension as we try to force life into a mold that doesn't always fit. There's also the fear of losing control, which is perhaps one of the most pervasive forms of resistance to letting go. Control gives us a sense of stability, a belief that we can shape the world around us to meet our needs and desires. But the truth is, control is often an illusion. Life is unpredictable, and no amount of planning or effort can account for every variable. Letting go requires us to face this reality, and that can be a terrifying prospect. It asks us to trust in ourselves, trust in others, and trust in the unknown. This fear is compounded by the messages we receive from society. We are often taught that perseverance and determination are virtues, and while there's truth to that, it's easy to misinterpret. We may come to believe that letting go is the same as giving up, that it's a sign of weakness or failure. This belief can keep us stuck in situations that no longer align with our values or well-being. It can make us feel obligated to hold on, even when the cost is far greater than the benefit. Part of the challenge is that letting go requires vulnerability. It means opening ourselves up to uncertainty, admitting that we don't have all the answers, and accepting that we can't control everything or everyone. Vulnerability, while often uncomfortable, is also where growth happens. It's where we learn to trust ourselves, to navigate challenges with resilience, and to embrace the beauty of imperfection. But to get there, we have to face the fear head on. This process of confronting the fear of letting go is not about eliminating the fear altogether. Fear is a natural response, and it serves a purpose. It alerts us to potential risks and encourages us to think carefully about our choices. The goal, then, is not to suppress the fear, but to understand it. To ask ourselves, what am I afraid of losing? Why does this feel so important to me? And is holding on helping me, or is it holding me back? When we begin to explore these questions, we often discover that our fear is rooted in deeper, more personal concerns. Maybe we're afraid of being alone, of feeling unworthy, or of being judged. Maybe we're afraid of failure or of the unknown. Whatever the source, bringing it into the light allows us to see it more clearly. It gives us the opportunity to respond with compassion instead of resistance. Letting go is an act of courage. It's a decision to prioritize our inner peace over external circumstances, to trust in the process of life, even when we can't predict the outcome. It's about recognizing that clinging to what no longer serves us doesn't protect us, it holds us back. And while the fear of letting go may never fully disappear, we can learn to navigate it with grace. We can learn to hold space for our fears without letting them dictate our actions. This journey is not linear, and it's not something we master overnight. There will be moments of doubt, hesitation, and even backtracking. That's okay. Growth is rarely a straight path, and every step, no matter how small, is a step forward. Over time, we begin to see that letting go doesn't mean losing everything. It means creating room for what's truly meant to be. It means trusting that we are enough, just as we are, without the need to cling to what's outside of us. The fear of letting go will always be part of the equation, but it doesn't have to define us. When we learn to face it with curiosity and courage, we open ourselves to a life that is richer, freer, and more aligned with who we truly are. The power of boundaries is one of the most profound yet often misunderstood concepts in emotional well-being. Boundaries are not walls meant to shut others out. They are bridges that allow us to engage with the world in a way that respects both ourselves and those around us. They create the space needed for relationships to grow healthily and authentically. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about bringing clarity and structure to our interactions, ensuring that we can connect without losing ourselves in the process. Many of us have been conditioned to see boundaries as selfish or unnecessary. We're told to be flexible, accommodating, and selfless, often at the expense of our own needs. Over time, this can lead to resentment, burnout, and even the erosion of our sense of self. Without boundaries, we may find ourselves saying yes when we mean no, giving more than we can afford, or feeling guilty for prioritizing our well-being. This pattern often stems from a desire to please others, to avoid conflict, or to earn validation, but it comes at a cost. Boundaries are essential because they define where we end and others begin. They help us identify what is ours to carry and what belongs to someone else. Without them, the lines can blur, and we may take on responsibilities, emotions, or expectations that aren't truly ours. This can leave us feeling overwhelmed, drained, or disconnected from our own needs and desires. Boundaries are not just about protecting ourselves, they're about creating an environment where everyone involved can thrive. One of the most significant challenges with boundaries is the fear of how others will react to them. We worry that setting limits will make us appear uncaring or ungrateful, or that it will lead to rejection or conflict. This fear is deeply rooted in our need for connection and acceptance, and it can make the act of setting boundaries feel daunting. But in reality, boundaries are not about rejecting others. They're about honoring both ourselves and the relationship. They create a framework within which connection can be more honest, respectful, and sustainable. It's important to recognize that boundaries are not one size fits all. They look different for everyone and may vary depending on the context. What feels like a healthy boundary in one situation might feel restrictive or unnecessary in another. This is why self-awareness is a crucial part of the process. We need to understand our own limits, values, and priorities before we can communicate them effectively to others. Setting boundaries begins with identifying what matters most to us. This involves reflecting on our values, needs, and goals, and recognizing where we may be overextending ourselves or compromising on what truly matters. It's about asking ourselves, what do I need to feel safe, respected, and fulfilled in this situation? Once we have clarity about our needs, we can begin to articulate them to others. Communicating boundaries is another area where many people struggle. It can feel uncomfortable or even confrontational, especially if we're not used to asserting ourselves. But boundaries don't have to be harsh or rigid. They can be expressed with kindness and compassion, both for ourselves and for the other person. For example, instead of saying, I can't deal with this right now, we might say, I need some time to process my thoughts before we continue this conversation. The message is the same, but the tone invites understanding rather than defensiveness. Boundaries are also dynamic, they're not set in stone. As we grow and change, so do our needs and capacities. This means that boundaries may need to be revisited and adjusted over time. What worked for us in one phase of life may no longer be appropriate in another. This flexibility doesn't mean compromising our core values. It means staying attuned to our evolving needs and circumstances. It's worth noting that boundaries are not just about saying no. They're also about saying yes to what aligns with our values and well-being. They allow us to prioritize what truly matters and let go of what doesn't. By setting boundaries, we create space for the things that bring us joy, purpose, and connection. We free ourselves from the pressure to be everything to everyone and instead focus on being true to ourselves. There's a misconception that boundaries create distance or separation, but the opposite is often true. When we set healthy boundaries, we create a foundation of trust and respect that strengthens our relationships. We show others that we value ourselves enough to take care of our needs and that we trust them enough to respect those needs. This mutual understanding fosters deeper and more meaningful connections. Of course, not everyone will respond positively to our boundaries, and that's okay. Some people may resist or challenge them, especially if they're used to us being overly accommodating. This resistance doesn't mean that the boundary is wrong. It's often a sign that it's necessary. It's important to remember that we are not responsible for other people's reactions to our boundaries. Our role is to communicate them clearly and respectfully, not to control how they're received. Boundaries are an act of self-respect, but they're also an act of courage. They require us to stand in our truth, even when it feels uncomfortable or vulnerable. They challenge us to trust ourselves and to believe that our needs are valid and worthy of being honored. This isn't always easy, especially if we're used to putting others' needs ahead of our own. But it's a practice that becomes more natural with time. Embracing impermanence is a lesson in letting go, a way of understanding that change is the only constant in life. It is a concept that can feel unsettling at first, but it holds a profound power. Everything we experience, every relationship, moment, success, and failure is temporary. It ebbs and flows like the tides, and no matter how tightly we try to hold on, life continues to move forward. This realization isn't meant to instill fear or sadness. Instead, it offers us an opportunity to live more fully and authentically. It invites us to find beauty in the fleeting nature of things, to appreciate the present, and to release the need to control what cannot be controlled. When we resist impermanence, we create unnecessary suffering. We cling to the illusion of permanence, hoping to freeze moments in time or preserve situations exactly as they are. We tell ourselves that if we can just keep things stable, we'll be safe or happy or fulfilled. But life doesn't work that way. Change is woven into the fabric of existence, and trying to resist it only leaves us frustrated and exhausted. The truth is that everything, from the smallest detail to the most significant event, is in a state of constant transformation. Learning to embrace this truth is one of the most liberating practices we can undertake. The fear of impermanence often stems from our attachment to people, outcomes, and identities. We attach ourselves to relationships, careers, achievements, and even failures, believing they define who we are. These attachments create a sense of stability and purpose, but they can also trap us. When we tie our identity or happiness to something external, we set ourselves up for disappointment because nothing external is permanent. Relationships evolve, careers shift, achievements fade, and failures lose their sting. The more we attach ourselves to these things, the harder it becomes to let go when they inevitably change. Embracing impermanence doesn't mean we stop caring or detach from the world. On the contrary, it allows us to engage with life more deeply and intentionally. When we understand that everything is temporary, we begin to cherish the present moment in a way we might not have otherwise. We stop taking things for granted and start seeing them for what they are, fleeting, precious, and irreplaceable. Whether it's a conversation with a loved one, the joy of a quiet morning, or the lessons learned from a challenge, impermanence reminds us to be present and to fully experience life as it unfolds. This perspective can also help us navigate loss and change with more grace. When we hold on too tightly to the way things were, we create a barrier to growth and healing. But when we accept that change is natural and inevitable, we open ourselves to the possibilities that lie beyond the present moment. This doesn't mean we won't feel pain or grief. Those emotions are a natural part of the human experience. But by embracing impermanence, we can learn to move through them without becoming stuck. We can honor what was while making space for what will be. Impermanence also teaches us about resilience. It shows us that even the most challenging situations are temporary and that we have the strength to endure and adapt. When we're in the midst of a difficult period, it can feel as though it will last forever. But just as joy and success are fleeting, so too are pain and hardship. By holding on to the knowledge that everything changes, we can find hope and perseverance, even in the darkest moments. The practice of embracing impermanence is not about dismissing the importance of our experiences. It's about putting them into perspective. It's about recognizing that while we can't control the flow of life, we can control how we respond to it. We can choose to meet each moment with openness and curiosity rather than resistance and fear. This shift in mindset allows us to approach life with greater flexibility and adaptability, making it easier to navigate the ups and downs. In relationships, impermanence reminds us to appreciate the people in our lives while they are here. Instead of taking them for granted or trying to hold on to them too tightly, we can focus on building meaningful connections and cherishing the time we have together. This doesn't mean we won't feel sadness when relationships change or end. It means we can honor them for what they were and carry their lessons with us. Impermanence teaches us that love isn't about possession or permanence. It's about presence and connection in the here and now. In our personal growth, impermanence encourages us to let go of old identities and beliefs that no longer serve us. Just as seasons change, so do we. Clinging to outdated versions of ourselves can hold us back from becoming who we're meant to be. Embracing impermanence means giving ourselves permission to evolve, to release the past, and to step into the future with courage and curiosity. It's a reminder that growth is a continuous process, and that each moment offers an opportunity to begin again. One of the most profound lessons of impermanence is that it invites us to let go of the illusion of control. We spend so much of our lives trying to plan, predict, and manage every aspect of our experience. While planning and preparation are valuable, they can only take us so far. Life has a way of unfolding in unexpected ways, and when we cling to our expectations, we set ourselves up for disappointment. By embracing impermanence, we learn to release the need for certainty and to trust in our ability to navigate whatever comes our way. Impermanence is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. It's a reminder that life is a series of moments, each one unique and unrepeatable. When we let go of the need to hold on, we create space for joy, connection, and growth. We learn to live with intention and gratitude, knowing that the only thing we truly have is the present moment. This realization doesn't diminish the significance of our experiences, it enhances them. It allows us to see life for what it is, a dynamic, ever-changing journey that is both beautiful and fleeting. The journey of self-acceptance is one of the most transformative paths we can walk. It's not about reaching a point of perfection or meeting an external standard of worthiness. It's about looking inward and deciding, perhaps for the first time, that we are enough as we are. It's about releasing the need for constant validation from others and instead finding peace and pride in our own existence. This journey is not easy, nor is it linear, but it holds the power to change the way we view ourselves and the world around us. At its heart, self-acceptance is about embracing every part of who we are, our strengths and weaknesses, our successes and failures, our beauty and flaws. It means recognizing that we are complex, multifaceted beings, and that's what makes us human. Too often, we judge ourselves through a narrow lens, focusing only on our perceived shortcomings or the ways we believe we fall short. These judgments come from a variety of sources: societal expectations, family pressures, past experiences, and our own inner critic. Over time, these messages become ingrained, shaping how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world. One of the biggest barriers to self-acceptance is the belief that we are not enough. This belief might stem from comparisons to others, feelings of inadequacy, or past wounds that haven't fully healed. We tell ourselves stories about what we should be, measuring our worth against standards that are often unrealistic or unattainable. These stories can be deeply damaging, convincing us that we need to change who we are to be worthy of love, respect, or happiness. But the truth is, our worthiness is not something we earn, it's something we inherently possess. Self-acceptance begins with self-awareness. It requires us to take an honest look at ourselves, to acknowledge not only our strengths, but also the parts of us we'd rather hide. This process can feel uncomfortable because it asks us to confront the aspects of ourselves we've been avoiding. But it's through this act of facing ourselves fully that we begin to understand and embrace who we are. Self-awareness is not about self-criticism, it's about seeing ourselves with clarity and compassion without judgment or shame. Compassion is a key element of self-acceptance. It's the practice of treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a close friend. Too often we hold ourselves to impossibly high standards, criticizing ourselves for mistakes or shortcomings that we would forgive in others. Compassion invites us to let go of this double standard and to extend grace to ourselves. It reminds us that we are human, that we are allowed to make mistakes, and that those mistakes do not define our worth. The process of self-acceptance also involves letting go of the need for external validation. While it's natural to seek approval from others, relying on it can create a cycle of dependency that undermines our self-worth. When we base our sense of value on how others perceive us, we give away our power. We allow our self-esteem to be dictated by opinions and judgments that may have little to do with our true selves. Self-acceptance asks us to reclaim that power, to look inward for affirmation rather than outward. It's about learning to trust ourselves, to believe in our own worth, and to stand confidently in who we are. One of the challenges of self-acceptance is the fear of vulnerability. Embracing ourselves fully means acknowledging our imperfections, and this can make us feel exposed or insecure. We worry that if others see us as we truly are, they might reject or judge us. But vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's through vulnerability that we build genuine connections, both with ourselves and with others. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we are, we create space for authenticity and intimacy. We also give others permission to do the same, fostering relationships that are based on truth rather than pretense. Self-acceptance does not mean complacency. It's not about ignoring areas where we want to grow or improve. Instead, it's about starting from a place of worthiness. When we accept ourselves as we are, we create a foundation of self-love that supports growth and change. We can pursue our goals and work on our weaknesses not because we feel inadequate, but because we value ourselves enough to want to grow. This shift in perspective transforms self-improvement from an act of criticism to an act of care. A crucial part of self-acceptance is learning to let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism is the belief that we must be flawless to be worthy, and it can be a relentless and exhausting pursuit. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of striving and self-doubt, always chasing an ideal that is impossible to achieve. Letting go of perfectionism doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means embracing our humanity. It's about recognizing that our imperfections are not failures, but simply part of what makes us who we are. The journey towards self-acceptance is deeply personal, and it looks different for everyone. For some, it might involve healing old wounds or unlearning harmful beliefs. For others, it might mean setting boundaries or prioritizing self-care. Whatever the path, the goal is the same: to build a relationship with ourselves that is rooted in love, respect, and understanding. This relationship is the foundation for everything else in our lives, shaping how we interact with others, pursue our dreams, and navigate challenges. Self-acceptance is not a destination we reach and then move on from. It's an ongoing practice, one that requires patience and persistence. There will be days when it feels easy to love ourselves and days when it feels nearly impossible. This is part of the process. What matters is that we keep showing up for ourselves, even when it's hard. Each small step we take, each act of self-kindness, each moment of self-awareness brings us closer to a life that is more authentic, more fulfilling, and more aligned with who we truly are. Finding emotional freedom begins with understanding that we cannot